Welcome back to the channel. You're watching Sawtooth Tactical. All gun laws are infringements, and most of them are completely arbitrary in nature. In today's video, I want to talk about barrel length restrictions specifically, and just kind of how ridiculous that whole thing is. What is the difference between this firearm and this firearm? Not a whole lot. In fact, just an inch and a half. But an inch and a half can be the difference between going to prison or not. And I think that that is a pretty ridiculous concept. And unfortunately, it is the reality that we live in. While in the United States, we do have some of the most freedom of anywhere in the world when it comes to firearms, we also have some of just the dumbest gun laws ever. And I want to kind of talk about the history a little bit of why 16 inches is the arbitrary barrel length that makes a rifle and what the point of that is. What makes this dangerous and unusual compared to this or this? Technically, it's actually less dangerous, and we're going to get into all that. So make sure you're subscribed, and let's begin. So the idea for this video came about because a couple days ago, I did a short about pin and welding barrels. Specifically, this is a 14.5-inch barrel with a pinned and welded muzzle device to get it to the legal length to be a rifle of 16 inches, the arbitrary legal length. And when you make your muzzle device a permanent fixture of your barrel, a permanently attached part of it, then it becomes part of the barrel in the eyes of the ATF. And so you can have something 13.7, 13.9, 14.5 inches, and you can make it 16 inches, which legally makes it a rifle. If you don't pin and weld it, it's not a rifle. And that is a good way to start this video because, to me, that's a really good example of how ridiculous this whole thing is. If this 3-prong flash hider on the end of this here was not pinned and welded onto this, then this would be an illegal SBR. Unless, of course, I paid a $200 tax stamp and filed with the NFA to make this a short-barreled rifle like I did with this one. And that's ridiculous too, and we're going to get into that. But the reason for this video is because I got a bunch of comments on that short. Like people telling me to cry about something else. An SBR is an SBR, and the gun I was talking about is a 14.5-inch gun. For one thing, in my opinion, there should be no such thing as an SBR. As far as a classification goes, sure, a short-barreled rifle, no problem. But the fact that that is somehow classified and is legally different than a standard-barreled rifle or a long-barreled rifle is absolutely ridiculous. But also, what I think that a lot of the people that commented on that video don't understand, I mean, nobody's going to SBR a 14.5-inch barrel. This is not a short-barreled rifle. But it's a perfect example of how ridiculous these laws are when an inch and a half can be the difference between something being totally normal and legal or getting you $250,000 in fines and 10 years in prison if you don't pin and weld on your muzzle device. And that's just the start of it. So I've done a lot of videos on this channel about pistol braces, specifically when that whole pistol brace rule thing was going on and they were making pistol braces illegal, basically saying that any short gun with a brace was actually an illegal SBR. Luckily, that law is as good as dead right now, and so it's not something that we have to worry about. But the point still stands that something like this, with a pistol brace on it, just like that 14.5-inch with the pinned and welded muzzle device, totally normal and legal. But you put a different piece of plastic on the back end, and if you don't pay a $200 tax stamp, again, $250,000 fine, 10 years in prison for this. That's absolutely crazy. Quick word from this video's sponsor. I've been using Aura now for a couple of months. I know you guys have seen it in my videos if you've been watching, and it's a product and a service that I really actually believe in at this point. It has totally stopped me from getting spam calls. Now, data brokers are a real thing these days. Scammers, spammers, all this stuff. I've been trying to sell a pickup truck lately, and at first all I was getting was scammers. Well, Aura took care of that, and I'm not hearing from the scammers anymore. Unfortunately, I still haven't sold the truck, but I've got a lot of examples like that. In fact, the place where I work just recently got scammed, and we lost out on a whole day's worth of revenue. Well, Aura can stop things like that from happening. They search the entire internet for anywhere where your information is being sold to people, and they submit opt-out requests on your behalf, which takes care of your information being out there. It clears you up so that you stop getting spam calls, you stop getting scammers. There are people out there these days whose whole career is just scamming people out of their money by finding their information on the internet. And as sickening and as sad as that is, it's a reality. And for only $12 a month, you can stop them from being able to take advantage of you. If you use my link, which is the first link in the description, aura.com/sawtooth-tactical, you get to try it out free for 2 weeks. And then you can decide if it's something that you still want to stick with. But Aura is pretty confident that you'll stick with it, and that's why they give you that 2-week free trial. $12 a month after that is a really good deal for all of the different things that you get with Aura. I've been sticking with it for a few months. I'm really happy with it. I respect my privacy, and I respect yours. You guys probably already know how I feel about the NFA in general. The fact that this firearm takes 2 $200 tax stamps, one for the suppressor, just something, an accessory to make your gun quieter, and one to have a different piece of plastic on the back end and to be able to put a forward vertical grip on it, is pretty dumb. And there's no possible way that that is supposed to be for our safety or the safety of society at large. When the laws are this arbitrary and ridiculous, it's about something else. It's about control. It's absolutely not about freedom, because, again, I'm going to compare these two. You see the difference there? It's not much. This one has a 16-inch barrel with a muzzle device just threaded on. This one has a 14.5-inch barrel with a muzzle device that's pinned and welded. Why does that 1.5 inch difference make this gun, if this wasn't pinned and welded, again, so arbitrary and stupid, dangerous and unusual? The U.S. military M4s now are 14.5-inch barrels. They also run Mark 18s. They have 10.3-inch barrels. Obviously, they're not unusual, and all firearms are dangerous if used dangerously. Totally safe if used safely. I've got a bunch of guns, and none of them have ever hurt anyone. I've hurt a bunch of steel and paper targets, and that is literally it. And at the same time, just to go back to this real quick, a different piece of plastic on the back of this, not dangerous and unusual. You put a piece of plastic that doesn't have Velcro strap on it, it's dangerous and unusual. You make it not silent by any means, but hearing safe, and somehow it's dangerous and unusual. And this is the thing. This video is not just about SBR laws in the NFA, but about gun laws as a whole, and why we constantly need to fight any laws that they're trying to push through. Because the way that this whole thing came about, the National Firearms Act in general, was in 1934. And then the Gun Control Act in 1968. And these things were allowed to come through, and we all have to deal with this many years later, almost a century later after 1934. We're 90 years later now. So the thing about the SBRs is this. When they were first pushing the NFA through, they wanted to outlaw handguns. And the whole thing had to do with organized crime at the time, gangsters, mobs, and they didn't want them to be able to have handguns. Also, silencers, suppressors, and machine guns. Well, in order for them to make sure that people didn't just take rifles and cut the barrels off to make them into handguns, they outlawed short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns. And they totally arbitrarily picked the length of 18 inches for a shotgun barrel, minimum length. And actually, at that time, it was also 18 inches for a rifle. That later became 16 inches. I'm not going to go into the exact details of that because I don't have it in front of me and I don't want to get it wrong. But there was like a government contract where they sold a bunch of old military rifles that happened to have 16-inch barrels after the NFA was put in place. And so they had to change it to 16 inches because they sold them to the general public. And technically the federal government was committing all these felonies by selling 16-inch barreled rifles instead of 18-inch barrels. So they changed it to 16 inches just because of that. But the whole point of it was so that people didn't make a handgun out of what would otherwise be a rifle. So this is a 9mm AR right here. Shoots the same round that this does, that this and that does, that does. 9mm. Yeah, you could probably use it as a handgun if you really wanted to. It's more effective as a rifle. And a short-barreled rifle, which is what it is. Now, it could be an AR pistol, again, with the brace, but I don't want to get too far off topic here. The whole point of the SBR and SBS, short-barreled shotgun laws, was so that people didn't have a way to get around the handgun ban. Well, before they passed the NFA, they decided through a bunch of argument and stuff going on that the people were not going to be okay with outlawing handguns. And so they took that off the NFA. Well, what they forgot to do, I don't know if they forgot exactly, I wasn't in the chambers when this all went down. What they failed to do was take off the restriction on short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, which wasn't even supposed to be part of the deal. It was just so that people didn't get around the handgun ban. And we've been dealing with that for 90 years since. And when you watch Stephen Dettelbach in front of Congress, when they're talking about the pistol braces, and they're asking him these questions, he says, well, Congress has decided that, a gun with that you can shoulder that is also concealable, this is concealable, is dangerous and unusual. For one thing, nobody is trying to, I can't put this in a holster in my pants. That's absolutely not going to happen. And when you put a brace or a stock on something, it absolutely becomes bigger and less concealable. So that whole argument is stupid. The whole thing is illogical and has nothing to do with safety, with dangerous and unusual, or with anything else. It's just an arbitrary thing that got put into place to cover something else that didn't even get banned. And that's how I feel about pretty much all gun laws. And again, that's why we need to fight all gun laws. And that's the only real point that I want to make in this video. Whether it looks like something that is not a big deal or not, it is. And it can have far-reaching repercussions. When Trump was in office and they banned bump stocks. Bump stocks aren't something that I really care that much about as far as that accessory, in particular. But because of that, because of the way that they went about that, the ATF now has used that same technique to do things like the frame and receiver rule, the pistol brace rule, the rule about who is engaged in the business of buying and selling firearms, which luckily there was just an injunction put in place against that. But it's not for everybody. It's kind of like the pistol brace thing where it's only for certain groups so far. And that's the thing. Any gun law, no matter how insignificant it might look, can have far-reaching implications that can affect us in ways that we might not even be able to see right now, but in the future might come back to bite us in the ass. And so we need to do everything that we can to be against gun control in every possible way. And that is the entire point of this video. Gun control is stupid. Gun laws are stupid. They're arbitrary. The fact that the piece of plastic on the back of this makes it legal or not, or paying a $200 tax somehow makes it not dangerous and unusual anymore, but without the tax, it's a felony. I just don't see how everyone in government doesn't see how dumb these laws are. And I'm sure a lot of them do, but they don't seem to make it a priority to do anything about it. They have other priorities, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem to generally be the Second Amendment. And that's why we can't let these things get put into place, because it can take years and years to fight them if they even get fought effectively at all. And so, just be against this stuff. Do what you can. Vote for people that are anti-gun control and pro-Second Amendment. We're in an election year, and it's a big deal. And I know Trump did not have the best record on the Second Amendment and firearms. But compared to Biden, he's a lot better. And I'm definitely not telling you who to vote for. Vote for whoever you think is the best candidate, not only for president, but for all kinds of other things. Just do your research. Make sure that they are not somebody that is going to either try to pass gun control especially, but also somebody that'll let gun control pass. We have to have people that are hardline against it. People like Brandon Herrera running for office in Texas, District 23. We got to support people like that. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. Please share it. Make sure you're subscribed. And from Sawtooth Tactical, stay strapped or get clapped.